Mine is. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request and be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant, except in the case of a comprehensive plan amendment, may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the City Commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to Resolution Number 2021-118, the City of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments virtually. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist must register with the city clerk as required pursuant to city code. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board's second special meeting on Mediterranean standards of October 29, 2024 to order. The time is 6:01. Jill, if you please call the roll.
Yes. Robert Behar,
Present.
Julio Gabriel,
Here.
Zuka Walensky. Here. Felix Pardo,
Here.
Javier Salman. Chip Withers,
Here.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Here. We will not have swearing in tonight as this item is legislative. Everyone who speaks today must complete the roster on the podium. We ask that you print clearly so the official records of your name and address will be correct. Zoom platform participants. I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open their chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez stating you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill will call you when it's your turn. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone platform participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Procedure that we'll use for tonight's meeting will be first the identification of agenda item by Mr. Caller, then the presentation by staff. We'll go ahead and we'll open it to public comment, first in chamber, then Zoom platform, and then phone platform. We'll go ahead and close public comment. We'll have board discussion, motion, discussion, and second of motion if necessary, board's final comments, and a vote. If the record can please show that Mr. Salmon has arrived. Thank you. Tonight, we have had on this item actually 6 meetings. 5 actual, 1 was deferred. Just want to let everybody know that. Mr. Caller, if you'd please read the agenda item into the record.
Yes. Item E1, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code. Article 5, Architecture, Section 5-200, Mediterranean Standards. Article 3, Uses, Section 3-402, Restrictions related to location, and Article 16, Definitions to enhance the quality of Coral Gables Mediterranean design by requiring a conceptual design review, removing duplicative criteria, relocating inapplicable standards, supplementing existing criteria, and including additional Mediterranean building examples, providing for severability, repealer, codification, and for an effective date. There is a parenthetical which does provide you the information on the dates that this hearing has been either continued or deferred.
Thank you.
Item E1, public hearing.
All right.
Jennifer?
So I have a brief presentation that goes through the changes. If I could have the PowerPoint, please. For the record, Jennifer Garcia, Planning and Zoning Director. Thank you. So this is a kind of a snapshot of the review process. We've been back and forth with the Board of Architects as well as City Commission to update them and give the presentation. And again, back and forth with the Planning and Zoning Board and the Board of Architects. Every time that we've made changes as far as architecture, building precedents, or anything we think is substantial, we go back to the Board of Architects and make sure that we get their feedback and input as we move forward. So the summary is listed in your memo from staff. on page 1. I can run through that really quickly. So this relocates the sustainability that was previously in level 1 to be now prerequisites. And the intent is actually changing. So instead of it being more, to steal a word from Stephen was on, more green gizmo green, this would be more time-tested sustainability. You know, high ceilings, natural ventilation, things that are more inherent with traditional architecture. Also removing the street lighting, that was always kind of a concern of why this is part of Mediterranean bonus. It's not really related directly to the actual style or architecture of the building. So remove that
Actually,
from.
Jennifer, if I
Sorry.
may, we did skip one item, which was the approval of the minutes. If we can go ahead and I do apologize. I'm going to interrupt you a second.
I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion to approve, and we have a second of the meeting minutes, and those were the meeting minutes of 9/26/2024.
Okay. The motion was made by Mr. Behar and second by
Javier?
Javier.
Yes. Any discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Sue Kavinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar.
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. Sorry, Jennifer.
Oh, no worries.
Continue, please.
So I got the PowerPoint back. Thank you. And then also clarify the habitable liners for the front streets, clarify pedestrian improvements and what that would include for the public open space, the intent of the open space fund. We added the Board of Architects as a reviewer for the sidewalks and the type of pavers. There was some concern about that. We clarified the reallocation of the square footage for the building lot coverage. We also removed the 1/3 and the 25 feet maximum height. I'll get that in just a second. And then also clarify the definition for architectural precedents. So really quick, the first change on page 10 of your attachment A, showing the removal of that street lighting. And then on page 12, beginning of page 13, the addition of the sustainability. Again, this is less of that solar panels, water harvesting, and more of those more architectural, time-tested sustainability options. I can go through those as operable windows, natural ventilation, conservation of shade trees and landscape area, garden rooms, having more outdoor space, of course, preservation and reuse of existing structures, those types of time-tested sustainability. At the bottom of page 14, you can see the addition of having clarification for the front street for a requirement of that habitable space for that liner. Page 16 are multiple changes for the public open space, clarifying what types of pedestrian amenities would be included in that, open space fund, and clarifying the intent of that and what that would be used for as far as a overall urban design move in our city and not just leftover open space that would qualify for that. Going on to the types of pavers that would be reviewed by the Board of Architects. The benches and fountains and pedestrian amenities, clarifying that would be within the private property, that expanded paving area we talked about the last meeting, and again, subject to the Board of Architects review and approval. Bottom of page 19, the building lot coverage, clarifying a lot of that intent as far as the building, I'll get into this more in detail, as the building site gets, building coverage gets more, where that square footage will be allocated to. And this is kind of a diagram that kind of explains that. We were asked to test that, so we tested that. Of course, there are two requirements. There's a minimum open space requirement, usually multifamily, that's 25% of the lot area has to be open space, landscape open space. And there's also a 60% building lot coverage. Right now, the med bonus is no minimum or maximum building lot coverage. So typically, all it's provided is 25% open space. So the change here would be that if you go over the maximum building lot coverage, you could accommodate that square footage either as an open loggia, porch, stoops, arcade, or even in the right-of-way. So as the building site gets larger, it's more difficult to be within that maximum lot coverage of 60%. And so again, that would be accommodated by either open loggias, arcades, porches, those kinds of spaces. So we also looked at some older precedents, not older precedents, but older buildings that were approved and built. This is 108 Menores, is the building that's on Menores in the North Ponce area. It's a very small lot. And of course, they meet their actual 60% lot coverage anyway, because it's much easier to meet that maximum lot coverage for smaller properties. As the properties get larger, it's more difficult to be within that maximum building lot coverage. They meet their open space. So this could be accommodated by, again, an open loggia along the side to activate that open space, for example, on Santillan. And then as the building site gets even larger, that maybe there'd be a combination of providing that additional lot coverage square footage as loggias and porches, but also in the right-of-way as well. And so moving on, there were additional examples, precedents given by Mr. Brett Gillis. We reached out to him. We went back to Board of Architects again, and we kept some of the ones that he suggested. Some of them were not kept for various reasons. We can get into detail. I have one here to get into that. But we added in, I think, a small handful. And these are images of those. So precedents were added to that list of examples that architects can use as far as design elements to incorporate into their building. And then the exclusion from height, we talked about 1/3 of a building, allow a building height might be too much, 25 feet might be too little. So what we looked at were obviously the regulation. So you can see here that this is the tallest building, right? So it's 190 feet with the med bonus. And then 30% of that would be 63 feet. So that would be 1/3 of the building height. And you can see that only is allowed to be beyond the maximum building height of 1/4 of the floor below. So keep in mind that rule. So looking at the Biltmore Hotel, that's going beyond that ratio of 33% of the maximum building height for their architectural features that they have. We looked at Alhambra Towers, which got a variance actually to have even more height beyond their habitable height. So they're at 58% of the maximum habitable space. And then Sofia Codina, they are a little bit under, I guess, at 30% of their maximum height. And then one we're more familiar with, we talked about last time, was the Ponce Park Residence Project, which they're 38% beyond their maximum habitable height. So we've talked about this with the Board of Architects. They feel that since it depends really on the size of the parcel, the proportions, the massing, that it should be left up to the Board of Architects and the proportions of the building determine how high that extra architectural feature should be. And then moving on to the last one was clarifying the definition of precedent. So those are kind of the 9 summary changes that's before you right now. And I think that's it, yes.
Thank you. Jill, how many speakers do we have in chambers?
We have 4.
Could we go ahead and please call the first speaker?
Maria Cruz? Sure. Armando? Not. Denise Carvalho?
I want to say thank you for going first.
It's a pleasure. It's very nice to speak to all of you. I know you have a big responsibility in front of you to decide on all those projects.
Could you state your name and address
My name
for
is
the record?
Denise Carvalho. I live in 6308 Caballero Boulevard, and I'm here to speak about Mediterranean bonus for you guys so that you can help us preserve our neighborhood. We need sustainability, as you guys are saying. We don't want exclusion from height because this is the Gables Waterway project, the way they are planning. This is my house. In pink, if you can see, this is the Marie Canal, Caballero Boulevard, South Alhambra. Up to here, 45 feet is what they are allowed to build. Up to here is what they are asking. And this would be the extra features, this in blue. So imagine the extra features, they also bring shade to our house. All of these would bring shade to our house. We have 3 houses here. This and this. Some of those houses here, we are all represented here. We are here to speak to you guys. I wrote a letter for the commissioners, mayor and vice mayor, regarding the meeting of the Board of Architects. Something you guys need to work is that the Board of Architects were deciding on this project, already planning that you guys are going to accept this height. Yes, Gus, the lawyer, he said, let me quote him. The architects had to vote, and they instructed the board to consider the developer's request as if the zoning change had already been granted. You guys are the ones that decide on the zoning change, right? So how can they decide and vote in favor of the project if you haven't decided on the height? They present this. This is huge. And they're supposed to decide on the whistles and bells and if it's beautiful, if it's not good, if it's perfect, if the material is like that. But what about the mass and the compatibility with the environment? Gus, the lawyer, the attorney, he said, leave this to the board, to the planning and zoning. You decide on the beauty. But this, even if it's like painted in gold, just like the most beautiful thing ever, it's like Biltmore. Is this good for this neighborhood? It's not.
I just want to ask something to Mr. Collier. Mr. Collier.
Yes. Sorry.
We're looking at the overall Mediterranean standards as opposed to looking at a specific project.
Right. I think I was trying to go over the minutes of your last meeting where I think Gus was commenting about the role of the.
He did. I agree with that.
And I.
But
He made all the architects very confused.
But if I may, my question is, are we supposed to take up a specific
Yeah, I'm not sure
project
it's
right
germane
now?
to this. Is this item scheduled for hearing before the Planning and Zoning Board at this point? Or is this before the Historic Preservation Board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to interject here.
Go to your microphone, Bucko.
Make sure it's on. No, not that one.
On this up there?
Trouble here. Please. All right. So I have a series of questions, and I also got the verbatim minutes of our last meeting on the 27th, and I highlighted every word that Mr. Ceballos said. Because if you recall from the previous meeting, there was some type of, well, we misunderstood. Well, when I read and highlighted what Mr. Ceballos said, I wasn't off the mark at all. And I think because I was trying to follow the speaker, she was talking about Mr. Ceballos as the attorney, not the
Yes.
attorney for that particular thing.
He was in the meeting of the Board of Architects, and he was misleading the architects into a decision, in my
Well,
point of view.
Do we have, is the microphone on? I'm having difficulty hearing the presenter. Are you?
Sorry, is it on? I don't know.
Is there a button that in front?
It may be
right
that
here.
she just wasn't talking
Is
into
it
the
red?
mic directly.
Push the button in.
Just get close to the mic, I think.
Just stay close.
I'll
to
do my best to be heard,
There.
sorry.
Well, and
it's a
I
little-
think also, For example, staff came up with graphics that I wish we would have had in our packets, because I would have liked to have been able to read it, understand it, and be able to ask staff questions. I think that's important. So if you take this as not a specific project, but as a generic project, I think the point is incredibly poignant. And just to understand, the turquoise greenish color is the bonus component.
The bonus component.
The bonus component. You called it something else, but it's the bonus.
Yeah, the bonus component.
Right. And I think also what you said was, you were
But
told.
this is what they can build, the
Right.
pink one. And in the law, it said, even more, in the law, the Coral Gables zoning code, it said that if MX1 or MF4 or whatever is located in front of a canal or a waterway that faces single-family homes, they can only go up until 45 feet. It's written on the code of the city, and they're still trying to convince people to put all these over and get this with the Mediterranean bonus. This is up to you guys, the pink one, because it would be MF4, but it's against the law.
Mr. Chairman, I would use this as an example.
As an example, I agree, but
We're
not,
not discussing a particular project.
that's where my concern is that
It's an
talking.
example,
In all
so that you do.
fairness,
Wait,
in all
we
fairness
can't,
to
we
everyone-
can't all talk at the same time. Go ahead, please, Felix.
In all fairness, I think this is great. This is an example of what you can and can't do. The code is basically a formula. And that's the application of a formula in this particular case. It just so happens that in section 5201 of the Coral Gables Mediterranean Style Design Criteria, and I have constantly said that we have a problem with the site specifics in this city, where if you earn the bonus, you can ignore and go above and beyond the site specifics. I think that's dangerous. I think it doesn't apply. But under section 5201, A, purpose and applicability, and this has to do with the Coral Gables Mediterranean Style Design Standards that incorporate a basic requirement standard and 2 additional levels. Under purpose and applicability, under 3, it says site-specific zoning regulations and Mediterranean bonuses. The reason this is important is that it says it may be awarded as supplemental additional intensity density or the reduction of existing limitations as assigned in Appendix A site-specific regulations. So the reason that it's important to understand that is that how can you assume that the upzoning is going to be approved? Furthermore, under number 7 of that same section, it says special location site plan review, and it calls out all these different zonings. It says all these zonings, districts, which are adjacent to or across the public right-of-way or waterway from any single-family residence, district, or FM1, the district shall comply with the following requirements to secure bonuses. So how the hell can you give someone bonuses when you don't have the upzoning secured? Now you've put the Board of Architects, who could do things about massing, you've just cornered them into a corner where now they say, oh my gosh, now look at the size of the building. So you're saying that it went from 45 feet,
To
which is the lower part, to
For
what, 100 and something?
190, and I didn't do properly. 190 is up to here. Because
But I just want to be clear, I want to be careful that we're not looking at a specific project.
This is an
So
example.
what you have done is you've brought us an example
yes,
of the Mediterranean bonus
So that
and
you-
what can be done, and that's what we're discussing.
And Mr. Chairman?
Exactly.
For the record, I have asked staff to give us examples, which today they had certain examples of certain components of certain things. but volumetrically, this shows you the danger of when you don't have compatibility and when you force the Board of Architects now to look at something that doesn't exist. And it says here, by the way, under special location site review, height limitations, limited to a maximum height of 3.5 stories or 45 feet. So in other words, the board has the ability of saying, wait a minute, we can't even evaluate the project or the massing because the zoning that you have, how would we then all of a sudden say, oh, we're going to go from 45 feet to 100 and some odd feet? That is crazy. The other thing is that the review process says you have to secure certain special locational site plan reviews, etc. It really is disturbing when you actually read the words that are in plain English of section 5201, which is just wrong. And then the review and authority of the Board of Architects, and by the way, the city architect is sitting back there waving was that a white flag? Would you like that to come up? Yes, absolutely. And the thing is that it says the Board of Architects shall be responsible.
Felix, what I'd also like to do, though, is before we get into the heavy nitty-gritty of all the comments, I'd like to hear everybody speak, and then,
I agree
because
with the chairman.
I think what we're going to do is get into
Yes.
a discussion.
I apologize. I am saying that this is, the way I see it, it's an example.
Agreed.
And I think it's important. And the other thing is that the city architect, I'm sure, Juan, were you there Thursday? I'm sorry? Were you there for this project on Thursday that you said?
Yeah, and during the discussion, he can talk about examples. My concern is we don't have before us a specific project that we're looking at. And the way that we need to look at it, and I think the way the speaker has presented it, is as an example of what could be done. And that's what we should be looking at this point. When the project comes before us, it's a different point. Right now, we're just looking at Mediterranean standards and so forth.
And one last thing, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, just to be crystal clear with the rest of the board members and the public.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you, everyone.
When you look at this, and you're looking at the Mediterranean design standards, et cetera, we went over the checklist. These are the checklist items. This is the roadmap of how you get to the checklist map. And there are certain things in there that are as or more important than any of those elements that are in the checklist. I want everyone to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming up. Next speaker, please.
Kathy Burnett. Sorry. Burnwhite, I think it is.
Hi, I'm Kathy Burnwhite, 6304 Caballero.
Welcome.
I would like to reiterate what my neighbor has said. I live in the house that's next to her, closer to the development. But the Board of Architecture wanted to turn down this project because of mass. And the lawyer said, Mr. Ceballos, no, you approve it on aesthetics, and then we'll go to zoning to see what they say about the mass. Now, Mr. Pardo, at your last meeting, you said, the board is 100% within the purview to look at massing. And even in here, it says, this is 5017C. The extent to which the proposed plan departs from zoning and subdivision regulations, including but not limited to density, size, mass, bulk, and use, and the reasons why such departures are not deemed to be in public interest must be disclosed. And that didn't happen. They got the Mediterranean bonus without jumping through all of the hoops. They did the checklist. And the thing is, the board was directed by the attorney to ignore the massing, to ignore what the Board of Architecture said their job was to preserve the traditional character of the neighborhood. The board, they were worried about that. They didn't want to rule. They wanted to make them go back to the drawing board. But the lawyer said, no, you rule on the aesthetics, and we'll then go to the zoning board to see if they change it. And that, it's bass backward, if you will.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to caution the board. This item is going to be noticed for this meeting, and we wouldn't want to make a decision on this item when all the parties aren't represented. So I think if we look at this more from an example for the standard rather than getting the specifics of what this board did or didn't do, but rather how the code should read, I think that would be
Agreed.
the best way to go.
That's my concern on it.
My goal would be to say, you have to approve the building as it is for zoning, traffic, parking, all of that. And then it goes to the Board of Architecture to see how lovely the building is. I mean, we put lipstick and mascara on the pig, but it's still a pig. And that's what happened here.
And I appreciate you and Denise coming up here and exposing this, because we have a flaw in the process. I brought this up before. It's the cart before the horse. You know, how can, I understand the Board of Architects is into the aesthetics, okay? But you can't approve something like this, okay, where it's a zoning change.
Yeah.
So it's a cart before the horse. So I think the best thing that this board can do, as opposed to the checklist, Juliet balconies and all that stuff, it's how we get there. That's the most important thing that we can do up here. And I think we have been kind of ignoring that, because there are other applications that we should be looking at also regarding work order changes. When something's approved and all of a sudden we have sliders instead of what was already approved. I mean, the process is extremely flawed. That's what we should be focusing on.
But to be fair, the Board of Architecture, they were going to deny this Mediterranean bonus until the lawyer spoke up and said, rule on the aesthetics, not on the bulk and mass. That's the thing. The lawyer, seems to me, gave the wrong advice based on your own, the extent to which the proposed plan departs from zoning.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
this is the part of the process of what is considered and not considered. I feel strongly about it. I called out the city attorney's office on this before. I stand by the words I used, and they are part of the verbatim minutes. Before this is over, I want to read just some of the highlighted minutes of the exchange between Mr. Ceballos and myself.
We can do that when
And
we,
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I can tell you right now is I don't appreciate if we're doing the process wrong, because then the rest of it is flawed.
continue, please.
I think I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Thank you for the floor.
Thank you for coming. Next.
Maria Cruz?
Mrs. Maria Cruz, welcome.
Mrs. Maria Cruz, 1447 Miller Road. As you can see, I do not live in the area, but Mediterranean bonus has nothing to do with one area. We're talking the whole city, and this is where the problem is. It's wonderful when you see projects that are beautiful, that would be wonderful in other places, but then they try to put them in the wrong place, and this is what the problem is. I think that my big issue is how what you're doing is wonderful. Let's look at the standards, but how are you going to enforce what you're saying? Because if people can go, I was there Thursday too, but forget about Thursday. How do we enforce what you're saying when it gets to the point that the project comes in and they bought a land that fits only this size building, but they want to build this size building, and we're going to force the issue, somehow ignoring the requirements? And this is what the anguish that you feel from the residents, you know, the ones that are really getting affected, which could be any of us in the future. Because this is why what you're doing is so important. It doesn't, you know, we're not talking about one project. We're talking about how what you're doing is going to affect the rest of us. And this is the serious part. The bonus, there's a reason for the bonus. There's a reason, but there's some criteria that has to be followed. Nobody can say, oh, ignore this criteria, just go ahead and do this. No, this is my concern. How are you going to make sure that what you are agreeing on, because you've done a wonderful job, how is it going to go from here to there? To me, there is a problem with the process. We are looking at the beauty of the building before making sure that the building fits what they want it. Why? It should be the other way. First, we should have, you know, if I'm gonna have somebody made a dress for me, right? And I buy a fabric that will not make it. What good is it that the design is beautiful, but the dress doesn't, the fabric I bought doesn't allow for that dress because it won't be big enough. And this is what you're trying to do in some places in the city, that we're forgetting, we're ignoring, we're pretending, instead of making sure that what you're doing, which is very valid and very good, maybe it should be the other way around. Maybe we should go through planning and zoning before we look at what we're going to put there, because if you all do not grant the stuff, then what purpose is it to look at the design? See, I think that's what the problem is. What good is the design if it doesn't fit where you want to put it?
But Maria, I got a question for you. Will you feel comfortable approving a zoning change without seeing something what it's going to look like? To me, that's a problem too, right?
Those are the problems that we have.
Because for me, is, you know, I hear you and I agree to some extent that we should approve a zoning change, but I need to see something before I give the.
But do you really need to see how it looks as opposed to the size? That is, because see, there's a difference. You can have a pretty building that is smaller. It doesn't have to be that big.
Yeah, but Maria, but you need to look at it contextually, how it's going to fit everything. I will feel very, you know, I would not support changing a zoning, you know, a land use change, a zoning change, without seeing what's going to go there. So I think it's
very hard. What comes first and what goes second?
Well, isn't there a conceptual design review? I mean, can't you have a skin, something that, without all the detail, without all the architectural detail that we could look at previous?
But that's what they're doing at the Board of Architects.
Through the chair. Wait. We need to have a little bit of control. Let's
But
go
do
ahead.
you
Please
understand what
continue.
the big issue to me, and like I said, at this point, I'm not affected, but it could be anybody's problem. The problem is, how do you make sure that what you're saying, which is very reasonable, I think, fits when it goes someplace else? Also, remember that in the people's mind, you know, when you go and you say, oh, this board or that board already approved it, they feel that that means that you all are caught between a rock and a hard place, because if they all thought it was very good, how could you not go along with it? You see what I'm saying? What is there to do to keep this issue from happening time and time again?
And maybe this is a question to the architect, to the city architect. The conceptual approval process that was implemented, shouldn't that be, you know, taken to the board, conceptually approved? Yes, come on up, please. But conceptually approved, but not get the med bonus until it comes to us, and then you go back.
That may be the solution.
So, Juan Riesco, city architect. The conceptual review process that we have in place now does not proffer a disposition. First of all, the conceptual review that we do now at the BOA level is purely an aesthetic discussion on design, big picture questions. There is no disposition. There is no requirements for submittal. It's purely a discussion that what it does is it assists the developer in aligning their project with the city's requirements. So we try to help them at that level. That's what we have in place now. If you're thinking that it should be modified, then maybe that's a discussion.
Well, maybe
we can
that's
have.
what should happen. That process should happen.
But
That's not what we have in place currently.
right, but what I'd like to remind the board is that discussion I think we should have after the speakers have put in all their comments. We've taken our notes.
We're
And then
putting
we
the
can have a
little bug
discussion.
in your ear so you know what needs to be discussed.
Oh, I write it down.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back it down?
Yes.
Thank you.
Armando?
Good evening, Board. My name is Armando Perez. I live at 6312 Caballero Boulevard. 6312 Caballero Boulevard, Armando Perez. I'm just going to say pretty much what Denise and my other neighbors have stated. There seems to be a flaw in the system where a med bonus is awarded when a conceptual review should be kind of approved and then you guys go through your process, approve the mass and the size of the building, and then it goes back to the city architect, to the Board of Architects, and they review and they put the bells and whistles on the buildings as they see fit. Not when it goes through this process, the well is kind of poisoned when they've already received, somebody receives a bonus of 2 stories and additional mass based on the potential change of a code. And then they could come to the board and argue their case. The Board of Architects has already approved this project. They're good to go. They say it's the best thing they've ever seen since sliced bread. And then you guys are forced to, maybe we should change or approve a variance or go from an MF1 or MX1 to MF4 or whatever the code terms are. That's all I was going to say, because it does impact a lot of families and whatnot. These changes are pretty drastic. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any more speakers, Jill, in chambers?
No more speakers.
Do we have any speakers on Zoom?
No, I've forwarded a message and no one has indicated they want to speak.
What about the phone platform?
No.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close it for public comment, and I'd like to go ahead and open it for discussion. Chip, I'd actually like for you to go first if you're okay with that.
I am. If I sound a little slurry, my left side of my mouth is a little numb, so I apologize. But I didn't really see all this coming, but I think it's a huge issue. I think that maybe a solution, the properties that are built by right probably can go through a normal process. I'm guessing. I'm just trying to figure out how to cut the baby here, because those properties really, as long as they're within the code, then we probably won't even, be that much involved with them, I would suspect. Is that generalization?
That's reasonable, yeah.
All right. So we're really looking at those that are pushing the envelope beyond what our code states anyway, is what I see. So if that's the case, to me, an architect is gifted enough to take a mass, and I guess you architects can speak to this. You can make taller buildings look smaller and massive buildings look less massive. I mean, is that a goal when you design buildings? And so, maybe there's a middle ground in there somewhere where the process can move forward. And I don't know what the cost is on this. I don't know what the options are on this. But can a person design 2 different buildings based on what they can anticipate size and massing?
Yes. If I may, please just
Anyway,
respond to
sorry about that.
Mr. Withers' comment, because it's salient to what we're discussing today. An architecture firm and a developer, when they go through the process of designing a building and presenting it for potential approval, and I emphasize the word potential approval, because until it gets approved, it's not approved, all right? And they take a risk, as we have seen, for example, in the US 1 Shopping Center, the old Pier 1 Shopping Center across from UM, they came in with a project which this board said, forget it. It's too big, it's non-compatible with the neighborhood, and guess what? All the money they spent on that is now garbage, and they get to start all over again. And that's the risk they want to take. Now, if that's something they want to do, they're welcome to it, but that's why they have to come here for approval. And if they have received Board of Architects approval, which is what had happened on the particular project that I'm mentioning, and I'm only bringing it up because it's now history. It's not yet to come. There may be another project coming, but at least the one that was submitted was completely and roundly and resoundingly rejected. So I don't see the necessary glitch in the system that has been proffered. I think that the process of the Board of Architects may want to emphasize more the massing, especially when you have adjacency issues regarding scale, and then put the brakes on it at that point and saying, hey, you know, you're welcome to present it, but you're not going to get it necessarily approved because you're not going to approve it because it's not compatible with the neighborhood. We have a compatibility clause that we've approved and we're going to be submitting. Now we need to give it teeth. And the Board of Architects is the one who's going to be able to tell them yes or no as to whether or not it's compatible before it gets to here, assuming that they need something else beyond that. Now, we're talking specifically about planned area development projects. These are projects that are going to have more than 200 linear feet of frontage or a certain amount of area or acreage, or in this case, in some cases, I don't want to say this case, but in some cases, adjacency to public rights-of-way and waterways, et cetera, and other special features of the city which make them unique and important to the ultimate development of the fabric of our city. So, whereas I see that our process is not necessarily flawed, I think that we could probably emphasize it more by allowing the Board of Architects to deny projects that are not compatible with their surrounding neighborhood and just leave it at that. And then if it gets passed as a compatible project and it still is in need of an approval because it's a PAD, because by definition a PAD has to come to this board for approval before it's approved by commission, then that should be the process.
So if it does not pass the Board of Architects, does it come to us in the same way it's presented to the Board of Architects?
Not until it's past the Board of Architects.
But I don't think that's the problem, Javier. I think the problem is that it goes to the board, gets the Mediterranean bonuses without getting even a conceptual that, if you really, in my opinion, analyze the process, it should go to the board, get a conceptual. Doesn't mean it's getting the Mediterranean bonus, it potentially could get there, but you have to come to the plan zoning, get this, the upzoning, whatever process will take, and then you got to go back to get the Mediterranean bonuses.
Again, developers and we as architects sometimes take this on as a risk, assuming that we're going to be building something that's compatible and that we're going to be able to present it to the board and to the city and to our fellow neighbors in a way that they're going to approve of it. Now, the Board of Architects is charged with here compatibility review. What we're talking about here is compatibility issues. If they don't approve it based on a compatibility issue, then there's no reason why it should come to us. It should come to us approved, ready to go. Unless we want to say, okay, you got to submit for zoning review on a cardboard box volumetric basis. That is of use to no one, and that's exactly what you said.
I disagree.
Buildings.
I disagree with you because you're making the Board of Architects give Mediterranean bonuses without having to come here. So, I disagree with you 1,000%. I think the process conceptually it could get approved. Then you get the upzoning, you get whatever, and then you got to go back for the aesthetics of the building. And that's not the way the process is being conducted today because we don't have those requirements.
And I totally agree with you, Robert. And that's why I was getting at some kind
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, please. Make sure this is on the record. Thank you, Sue.
That's your Christmas present. But I guess that's what I was alluding to originally. Go in with a concept, okay? Come here for either approval or denial of the upzoning, and then go back to the Board of Architects for the bells and whistles. It just makes sense.
It does make sense.
I would like the city architect to, what's your opinion on that?
Again, Juan Riesco, city architect. I feel, I sat on the board for 10 years, okay? And I felt awkward when I reviewed projects of this nature where we were told the height is not something that we discuss, okay? The height. If this upzoning allows 13 stories and the developer comes in with a 13-story building, that, in a sense, was taboo. We could talk about the mass, we could talk about the scale, we could talk about the envelope, we could talk about the finishes, we can talk about the materials, but we were always, and this is going back to the previous planning and zoning director. And so this was a contention that I felt when I sat there. We were approving or reviewing projects and granting med bonuses based on the supposition that this zoning change was going to happen. That was a directives that we were given. We have to look at the project based on the fact that this thing is happening. So that changes the dynamic of how you look at things. And yes, we could have discussions about the mass if we felt the building was too fat, too short, too tall, too skinny, too wide, not enough movement in the building, not enough up and down, not enough in and out. I mean, we talked about all those things. But this discussion has been going on for years, and Mr. Ceballos, I think, touched on that subject in the last meeting we had. And again, this is the scenario that we get put in. It's awkward from our perspective. Yes, it is. The board members feel somewhat strange that they're looking at something that's not really there in terms of zoning. And so we get shut down, and so we try to limit the discussion, the direction of the conversation towards what we feel is important to the Board of Architects, which is the aesthetics, the way the building looks, the way the building gets built, the materials that get put in, how the building addresses the compatibility within that constraint, where the height, in other words, we were told, hey, you cannot tell somebody you can't do a 13-story building. That's not acceptable from the Board of Architects rebuttal. That was not allowed, that was not up for discussion. And so we have to deal with what we get handed in terms of policy, procedure, protocols. We go by what we were told, and that's what we did, again, when I sat on the board, and that's what I'm doing now as a city architect. Because it's been very clear to me that that's the way that the process in this particular city works, and I think it works that way in other municipalities, but other municipalities don't have the Board of Architects. Other municipalities may or may not grant bonuses. But my understanding, putting myself on the shoes of the developer, okay, I'm coming to this city to do a project. And like every good developer, I want to max out my site, right? That's kind of, I mean, all the architects in the room, I think we've all heard that. When we go to that first meeting, I want the highest and best use, and I want to build the most that I can, typically. Some developers understand that quality is better than quantity, and there's a couple developers in town that respect that and appreciate that and do that. But the typical developer wants to maximize his investment, and that's typical in this business. You're going out on a limb, like Javier said, I'm going to spend $150,000, $200,000 on architectural fees to design a building that's 15 stories. It's not guaranteed that I'm going to get approved. That's my risk as a developer. And I have, the way the system works, I have that opportunity to do that. I want to push the envelope. I want to maximize what I can do in this city. I want to maximize my return. And so that's what they do. But again, it's not guaranteed. We grant med bonuses. Yeah, that's one hurdle in a series of multiple hurdles. It's got to go through P&Z. It's got to go to commission, which ultimately is the body that grants the 13 or the 18-story building. It's not really the BOA. It's not really P&Z. That discussion happens at the commission level where the negotiations are intense. And what do we get if we give you an 18-story building? What does the city of Coral Gables get? We get a park, we get infrastructure improvements, we get upgrades to our fire systems, whatever the commission feels is important to them at that particular time and moment, that's up to them, and we don't get involved at that level. So we try to limit our discussions to aesthetics, to architectural elements, to mass. Yes, we do discuss mass. I know that you guys don't think we do, but we discuss mass extensively. And we feel, for example, in the building and the model that she presented, the model shows a level rooftop. That's not the case. The building on Caballero steps down from 13 stories to, I think, 9 or 7. To 9, right? 9, 11, and 13. So there's 3 tiers.
Excuse me.
So there is a gesture that the architects responded to in one of the early discussions when that project was brought to the city. We talked about that. Hey, you need to address the residential neighborhoods south of you. You need to address the buildings on the east side. You need to address US 1 corridor. So all those things are discussed, are somewhat negotiated in those meetings, in multiple meetings. We just granted med bonus in last meeting, but we're very far away from the design. And that's a moment in time that I like to specify in my meetings, is that I tell the developers, hey, just because you got med bonus doesn't mean you got approval on the project. That's just one step. Now we got to get into the nitty gritty. Now we got to get into the buildings. There's 4 or 5 different buildings that have to be evaluated. And so we're going to go through each building one meeting at a time and discuss each particular building and how it works with the overall composition. So there is a lot of scrutiny, there is a lot of discussion about mass, but again, the height issue is something that we've always been precluded from. And so that's just the policy and the procedure we have in place.
Javier, you had
Mr. Chair, if I could be, Juan just said something very important. He says, we approved the med bonus, now we have to figure out the design. That's backwards. You just told them they can build.
No, that's not what we told them was that the direction that they're heading in terms of the aesthetics of the building is proper, based on the med bonus requirements. That's all we told them. Now, we got to figure out the design, which is the second hurdle and the bigger hurdle, in my opinion.
Well, the thing that blocks all of that is the fact that they might not get the upzoning.
But that's not in our purview.
And I understand that. So what I'm going to suggest, I'm going to make a suggestion. There's 2 issues that have come up. The process is flawed, number 1, and number 2, the marching orders are not following the code. What the city attorney is telling the Board of Architects is not following the law. So we have 2 problems here.
I beg to differ, and if I may.
Yes.
Juan, would you agree that any kind of approval, whether it's a bed bonus or the study of massing or anything like that, is only going to be conditional upon the conditional approval of this board and then the final approval?
Yeah, theoretically, that's
the theory, right? That's the way it works, right?
The understanding that everybody has.
I submit a project for a PAD somewhere in the city. I'm not going to even say where. And then I go and submit it, and I have different site-related issues around me that I have to address or not, because the Board of Architects is looking at the aesthetics of that building. That's one of the things I disagree with, because you have a contextual issue you have to respond to that is part of the checklist. And perhaps that needs to be underlined a little bit better and more clearly to the board
Javier,
with regards to its contextual issues.
It's a zoning issue. If
I understand
if the zoning
that
says I can put a 8-story building next to a house, it allows it by right or by whatever the nature of the procedure. How can we, in good faith, tell somebody, hey, you cannot?
No, because you're talking about an established property right to that somebody owns, and we can't necessarily have to go against that. But at the same time, any med bonus that you grant is going to be conditional upon the approval of this board, which is then conditional to the commission. So we have 2 conditional approvals.
Absolutely.
And as I gave in my example, we've seen where a developer has come in with a design, got it through Board of Architects, and it died a miserable, disgusting death here because it was just too damn big. and it was going to cast too big a shadow, and it's coming after a series of really bad precedents around it. And there are other properties in this area that are going to be developed and that are in the process of being developed. But that shot across the bow was very clear from this board as to what was going to be acceptable along the US 1 corridor or other PAD developments coming forward with regards to their adjacency to single-family neighborhoods. And if they want to hear it, that's fine. If they want to take their money and throw it out the window, that's their business as well. We're not here to fix up at the earliest stages. There is a process. The process has been defined. We are refining and defining that process in which we have included contextual issues to be included as part of that review. And your approval is always going to be conditional. Whether you like it or not, it's conditional. We grant the Board of Architects the right to provide a conditional increase because of its Mediterranean character and having met the criteria that we're discussing here today. But that approval is conditional.
Absolutely.
And then it comes to this board, and then we say yes or no.
And let's take it a step further.
And then if we approve it, if it goes to the commission, they could say no.
Which has happened.
Which has happened a lot of times. It's happened several times.
So the process works.
The process does work.
It does work, and I think it's in the big picture, it's probably the right way to do it when you think about the potential of the site. And I think that's
It's not pretty. Development is not pretty. Okay, and it's back and forth, and you're going to be negotiating with the neighbors.
Negotiation that has
and
to
you
happen.
better negotiate with those neighbors, otherwise they're going to kill you.
Well,
I know whenever I go into a conference room with a developer or other people that they're going to try to max out everything. I mean,
of course, that's their right, and that's what they want to do. That's fine.
you know what, Javier? I totally disagree with you. Totally disagree with you. And citing that one project that got resoundingly, like you say, resoundingly rejected, it wasn't resoundingly rejected. There were some things we didn't like about it, but it wasn't like, damn you, go away, okay? And you can't cite that one project because there have been other projects that have come before this board that slid through. So don't use that one project as being the example of how the process works. It doesn't work. We've seen things slip through the cracks constantly. Now is our opportunity and our responsibility to fix it. We have to fix the process, which is flawed. And we have to fix the city attorney's office that is giving wrong direction to boards. The city attorney is not following the law.
Well, I don't know if I would.
I
wouldn't say that.
I would say that there's
the code
a different,
is a law, correct? Yeah. The code is a law.
We have Mr. Caller here. Let him.
So the reason there are now about 120,000 lawyers in Florida is that there's always disagreement on the interpretation of the law. The city attorney's office believes that the focus of Board of Architects is on design and it talks about in the code specifically architectural compatibility. It does reserve to this board the decision of whether the zoning should be granted or not granted. And yes, there's a risk to the developer. They build a beautiful building at whatever theoretical stories they want, 13 stories, that comes here and gets shot down. Now, you have the option, you have the opportunity, if you choose to do so, in looking at this code, is to you can recommend that you should change the procedure and have this board look at it first. That's part of your opportunity in reviewing this. That's the whole point of looking at this, of the Board of Architects and the criteria for Mediterranean design. Now, I think the focus really was on the design, not necessarily on the procedure. But since the board is a recommending board, if you want to add a recommendation that you feel, and you may not feel, and maybe the majority doesn't feel, that the process should be changed, you can do that. You can make that recommendation. But the focus of this was to go through the Mediterranean design standards and to figure that out. I don't know if there was a thought when this was coming to you that you might change the procedure and have this board look at it first, but I have told this board on many occasions when we've had zoning matters and there's something you didn't like. I think there was a lighting standard you were unhappy about. And I said, you can address the commission and say, we're unhappy about the lighting standard, and this has come up. and that you can add that to your recommendation.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I disagree with Mr. Collar on one thing. As
I did
said,
pretty well if all you disagreed with me was on one thing.
I want to make sure, and I thought I made it clear, that the sections that have to do with Mediterranean ordinance, it's not just the checklist. We concentrated a lot about the features, the aesthetic features. And by the way, when the preliminary design concept to come before the board was brought up by the Mediterranean Blue Ribbon Committee that I chaired, and that 2 other members on this board were on that Mediterranean Blue Ribbon Committee. The reason that that was so important was to discuss also the massing, which Mr. Fiesta didn't say the first time, but he did say it the second time he came up. The massing is extremely important.
Well, I believe in the, if I might say, in the record from the previous meeting, Gus Caballo did mention the massing, did he not? I was just looking at I was not here for it, but I thought he did
I'm going to
mention.
read this into the record at another time.
Okay.
This meeting, or after this meeting, or at the end of this meeting.
Okay.
And the reason is because I disagree, because what he said and what has been purported that he did by the neighbors that were there is very different. So one of the things is that Mr. Bihar has a very good point. And that is that, well, you know, if we could have maybe a 2-step type of thing. Just so happens that on the 10th of July, I brought up a 2-part BOA review approval. Here are my handwritten notes. I brought it up and no, it's too complicated. Well, there's a need for it sometimes. The other thing is, so there's no disagreement, what this neighbor did, and by the way, I'm not putting my shoes in the developer's shoes. I'm putting my shoes in the residents' shoes, because they're the ones that are affected directly by it. The other people just make money. And I'm sick and tired of it. And I'll tell you right now, everybody has a right to do that. But the problem is not at the cost of destroying neighborhoods. That's where the incompatibility comes up. So if this particular neighbor that did a model on her own, which explains volumes of what works and doesn't work, what I've asked staff to do in the past is simply to come up with a volumetric model of what the existing code is or the existing zoning is, and then based on massing, and then what happens when you upzone it. And that's a particular, there's nothing wrong with that. Because there you could see what the impact is in the incompatibility with, or compatibility with the surrounding neighborhoods. It's not rocket science. And I really have an issue with the way that this is done. Because when you look at Mr. Savallo saying, so there is zoning related items, meaning upzoning, changes of comp plan, other things that are not within the purview of the Board of Architects, said the board. But then when the design review of the building happens, which is the second step, because typically the board will grant the bonus first and then review the design. I have heard more than once board members on this planning board say, well, it was approved for bonuses by the BOA. Well, and then what you're not seeing is what happened with someone putting their finger on the scale when it comes before the BOA and you're telling someone, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's wrong. But I think that staff providing, this is the zoning, and this is the zoning, upzoning, and then this is the zoning with the BOA approval to it, and then let's see what happens around it as far as compatibility. He also said that even though in particular situations they could do 100 feet to 120 feet because of the surrounding neighborhood and because of the context that they believe, the BOA, that they believe that the appropriate building here should be 80 feet. So now you're telling someone that couldn't simply look at the massing with the existing zoning versus the upzoning, but now you're gonna let them see if they could reduce, once you gave them the bonus, see if you could reduce it to 80 feet. That is the most absurd argument I've heard.
Felix, if, I just want to ask Chip, because I know that you're lengthy and you want to get this into the record. Chip, are you done with your comments?
Kinda.
Mr. Chairman.
Is it,
There's a lot.
I was taking a little longer because I saw him drooling.
I'm getting feeling back.
so he's ready to go.
No. I just want
Felix, I'll ask you to go
But you
after
have to
him.
understand one thing. Government hates being subjective. Government likes to be objective as possible. They have to be, because they got both sides to deal with at the end of the day. And so, trying to find the subjectivity in this whole issue, I think, is probably one of our biggest challenges. I really do. Because I hear what you're saying. That's what you said. I never thought we were going to go down this road. It's been discussed a lot since I've been around. Are we out of sync is what comes first and what comes second. So I think it's a healthy discussion, though. I really do.
I saw the
Thanks, Chip.
commission honored a citizen who just so happens we honored him first, through the Rotary Club, of a gentleman that was a teacher at Coral Gables High School for 65 years.
Yeah, Fenora.
Yeah, and probably failed you, right?
Gave me a C in typing, which I did not deserve.
So I put my money on Fenora. So the thing is that the last thing he said after accepting the thing, very humble man, great person, can't say enough great things about it. He says, and I can't believe I'm still here in this beautiful city, etc. The only thing is I'm surrounded by 13-story buildings. Mm-hmm. That is one of the saddest things I've ever heard. Everybody here has got to get this. And if we don't get it right, we're doomed. So I would say also that we need to make sure that when we have people representing us in whatever department, that they understand that the Board of Architects is not an aesthetic review board. The Board of Architects has one of the most important functions in this city. And if you're allowed to make them or allow them to do their work, they will do great work. But if you tie their hands, it's impossible for you to get good work out of anyone.
Mr. Pardo, can you speak into the microphone, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
I can hear him fine.
They're not.
So I would say that the most important part is that you can't look at a project that's being upzoned without looking at the potential mass and what the impact is around the surrounding neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That is rule number one. And the second thing is that whether it's a two-part BOA review approach, whether it goes here or there, yes, I agree with Robert that you shouldn't have someone approve the zoning without a plan, because the plan also will reflect massing depending on the talent of the designer and also the greed of the person trying to make money off it if they're trying to do something that goes to the ultimate max or beyond. So if you put 2 pounds in a 1 pound bag, usually that doesn't work very well. But I think it's really, really important that the Board of Architects understands that staff understands it in the preparation. And I think that it's very, very important that we all understand that this is part of the Mediterranean Code. It's the first section. It is the roadmap. And I just want to make sure that everybody on this board understands it. And it really is essential if we're going to make sure that the impact on all their properties, that they've lived there, I'm sure, for years, that all of a sudden, they don't have, let's say it one last time, another plaza surrounding them. I don't think that's right. It's not right today and won't ever be right.
Chip, are you,
I'm done.
you're done? Felix? Please continue.
Or what he said.
He's done.
I'm done.
Okay, Sue?
What he said and what he said. But there are some other.
Thank you, Sue, that's twice.
But there's another portion in here that also goes to the process that I think we need to discuss. And that's on page 4. And it regards any change to the approved design. The wording is, it's on page 4. Let's see, it's number 8, additional requirements. And it's C. Everybody have that?
Any change to the
Okay,
approved design?
I think this is too, I'll say gelatinous. It's very vague. Any change to the approved design, approved by whom? Which exceeds 5% of that which was originally approved shall be reviewed by the Board of Architects, Development Services Director or designee, and city architect for compliance with the original approval. It doesn't have any consequences, okay?
Jennifer, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so this was actually put in as a response, I think, to the Paseo when we had met early last year about this and went through line. The Paseo, as you know, changed the design from Board of Architects approval through the permitting process. And there wasn't really any teeth, I guess, that staff could point to saying you can't do that. So we put that in there for those kinds of deviations from the approved plan.
Listen, I think this is a great start, but it needs more language is what I'm getting at. It's too vague.
I think it just needs to be made clear.
It needs to be made
that's it.
clear.
It needs to be clarified.
And let me just say where I'm coming from on this, because I know of 2 projects only in my neighborhood. I can't imagine how this has gone on throughout the entire Coral Gables, but the Paseo and the Venera project, now known as the Standard, Mediterranean bonus. Guess what? Both of those projects have sliding glass windows. Okay, was there a change order for the Venera? I know there was a change order.
Venera, I'm not sure of. I think the Paseo was approved with horizontal roller windows.
No.
Again, this is
There was a
pre-
change order. I saw the change order. I asked for the change order.
Okay.
It was signed off by, who knows? I can't even read the signature. It was signed off by somebody. I have no idea who it
At the
was.
city, you're saying?
Yeah.
Somebody signed off a change? We don't sign change orders. First of all.
Somebody signed a change order.
We sign approved drawings or rejected drawings, but we don't sign change orders.
Okay,
That's
so
not our-
when there's a change order, who signs? Who signs a change order?
Contractor, the owner. That's
No,
like a
I don't think
binding
she's
agreement.
referring to a change order the way you and I know. I think she's referring to a modification, revision
Right,
that
a
came
change to
in.
the design.
Right.
Yeah, not.
We don't do change
no,
orders.
Change order for
Okay,
us is
I'm sorry.
the cost.
I'm sorry if I have the wrong terminology.
Right.
Thank you, Robert.
So
But
I think what-
whatever made that happen, it went from Mediterranean windows to sliding windows, okay? And we can say, oh, yeah, that was a mistake. Oh, yeah, well, what about the Venera? Same mistake? And those are only 2 projects in one neighborhood. What
I
about the
will-
rest of the city? Who
I
the
will
heck
research
approves
those
change?
both.
Not change. Who approves this? I mean, look, the language that I would like to see here is language that says if there's anything that changes from the original design, it has to go back to square one. Okay? And especially when it takes out one of the Mediterranean requirements. Windows, very important, right? That's a major.
Not a numerical 5%.
Not a numerical 5%. Any change
Yeah,
from
that's fine. Yeah,
any
so the 5%
deviation.
actually came from, remember the discussion we had when a neighbor from Alex Adams was here? He talked about, he went through his list of changes. He mentioned that the board kind of seemed acceptable to that. That's where that came from, but we can go back to the original of any changes.
But
Absolutely. I want to do that. Just so you know and understand is I review the construction drawings after the board approves them. And I have had this discussion with developers already where that's happened, where somebody wants to supersede or change something that wasn't approved at board level. And my response to them always is, if you change the windows or if you change the doors or you move the fence, you got to go back to BOA. And then they panic and they don't do it.
how did the
happened
Paseo?
several times
How did
now.
the Paseo get
Whether
through?
something gets slid in at the back end during construction, that is a bit more complex because I don't do inspections. None of my BOA guys do inspections. This is left up to the zoning inspectors and the building inspectors. So if there's changes during construction, and again, we've aligned ourselves now with the zoning inspectors. I've had several meetings with our zoning inspectors, and we've had this discussion. It's happening on the smaller scale work. On the larger projects, it's even more important, but on the residential work, we have people all the time changing out types of windows, doors, roof tiles, paint colors, fence types. I mean, it happens daily, and it's something that we do at staff level, and we try our best, to review the projects, to go back to the BOA approved drawings that are in the archives. We cross-reference those drawings against what they're submitting now, and 9 times out of 10, we probably find something. There's
Okay.
always that one that gets away, and we didn't catch it, we missed it, we weren't sharp enough that day, we weren't paying attention. We're all human. We all make
I
mistakes.
appreciate your efforts. I really do, Juan. But I think there has to be something more formal in this language that says if there is any deviation from the plans that have been approved, it has to go back to square one, number one. Number two, if something slips through, there has to be consequences. Why aren't the developers fined or made to change those windows if they're doing it on their own?
Yeah, again, I'll explore that on the Venera and the Paseo both. I'll find out and I'll get back to you on that. I am not aware of that change order that you mentioned.
Well, it's not a change.
That was pre my tenure, so.
Okay. I really would.
I'll look at both of those buildings.
I really would like to know who approved that because they should be fired.
Okay, I will look into it.
I think they're already gone.
Yeah,
They're probably working for the developer. They're working for the developer. Dan.
that may be something.
Let's
No,
concentrate.
no, they would not
Wait.
be working for the developer.
No.
Not that person. no.
Let's concentrate on what we have before us tonight to move forward. Sue, do you have any more comments?
No, but I really think this is the most important thing we can do. I'll reiterate, is the process, okay? The process and straightening out what the boards are being told their purview is.
And I appreciate what you're saying and trying to do, and the more ammunition you give us, the more power we have. So go for it. Honestly, change the wording, make it more specific, make it more detailed, because that makes my job easier. All I got to do is say, hey, guys, there it is. There's no discussion. There's no let's meet. Let's do this. No. It's black and white. You made a change to the approved design, you have to go back to BOA. I don't want to have a discussion with you.
Okay, so how does
So we
that,
can clarify that. So we can say any architectural change. I don't want you to think that the building gets higher or they encroach in the setback here, that they're going to go back to Board of Architects. I mean, square one, as far as architecture change, is Board of Architects, right? Or city
Yeah,
architect.
I mean, the
In this
majority of the
aspect,
things that
it's
we
all
look at
two,
are
right?
features, elements, finishes, materials. That's what we guard. That's what we want when we ask people to give us a higher quality building. And then again, the value engineering, the cost overruns, the schedule delays. At the end, they all want to just finish and they want to cut stuff out. And unfortunately, we don't allow it.
Yes, this isn't a
You have to
site
be
plan
privy to it.
change. This is only architectural.
right, I understand it. But if you could strengthen the language and also the process of who has to sign off on the change? And what are the I think we need something in here. What are the consequences? If somebody,
You don't get your permit.
pardon me?
We'll get a
You don't
CO.
continue with your permit, yeah.
You don't get a
your
permit.
TCO.
Yeah, the consequence is we don't approve the
Well,
change.
two buildings got COs. How did that happen?
I've been told there wasn't
What I'm
strong
talking about,
teeth
there has to
in
be
the
some
code to
consequences.
follow the
There has to be
process.
consequences.
Okay.
And I'd like to see that in here, because I think if a developer sees this and say, or somebody at the city sees this, I'm going to get fired if I do this. Or the developer says, you'll never build in the city of Coral Gables again. I mean, you have to have some teeth in this. There has to be consequences.
We want teeth.
I like your point, and I would like to offer
that's the
a
first time.
suggestion. I don't argue with you on anything
Wait.
that's important.
Before we
At
go,
any rate-
Javier, are you done, Sue? Okay, that way, go ahead.
All right. I have a series of points I'd like to discuss based on the fact that I came in a little bit late and I missed the last meeting that we had until the very end. But before I go to that, I'd like to make a suggestion that on that particular point that Sue was bringing out, it says you just add the caveat, or a CO will be denied until such time as compliance is achieved. Simple as that. And then guess what?
I love
You've
it.
got their attention.
Right.
Believe me, you've got their attention. And I would be all in favor of having that in there. Or it gets approved as to removal by all the steps.
Yeah, that's fine. We can put that in there. That's fine.
And that would solve that problem. So, anyway, back to the points that we have. So I'm going to offer that as a suggestion whenever we get to the point of making a motion on this item. Page 6, section 2D, intercolumnation. That's a big-ass word. Can we just use?
No cussing.
Excuse me. That's a big word. Can we just use columns, column proportions? And spacing?
Yeah.
I think that's what.
Yes, right.
It's the spacing that you're talking about.
Yes.
Page 8. This would be section 4. Top of the page, facades of large-scale buildings shall be articulated through the application of special architecture or ornate elements, such as, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and other ornate features or materials. I would like to add the word materials.
This is before.
After features,
Right.
and just add or materials. Okay, page 9, section 5D, porches, tooths may encroach at a maximum of 5 feet into the front setback. I would add where side setbacks are 10 feet or more.
Sorry, for D, the 5-foot encroachment to the front setback and side setbacks as well?
Into the front setback or side setback if 10 feet or more. Because you may, some areas you have a 5-foot setback, you put a stoop in there, you're cutting off a movement of water and people, et cetera. 10, page 10. I thought, page 10, section 10, parking garages, screening materials for parking garage openings shall only include, and you have a material which I don't believe is allowed, wood.
Building code?
As
I don't think it's allowed.
ornate feature?
We do decorative wood on commercial buildings, yeah, louvers, grills.
Out of wood?
We accept that at the BOA level, whether it's allowed.
But you're
by
not allowed,
zoning
you're not
code.
allowed for structural.
I'm sorry?
You're not allowed for structural.
On a multi-story building, probably not allowed to have wood.
No,
on it.
in any building.
On a type 1 building.
You're not allowed
Not
to do a wood structure
right,
on
not
the
an
exterior.
exterior wall, but this would not be structural. This would just be screening.
These are screens, yeah, these are used to
My
screen.
concern is that it's going to be an eyesore coming down the road later.
Again, these are things that are vetted by the board during the
All
design
right.
review process. We question them as long as the applicant shows us on the
Then I would
details.
say include treated
We
wood.
discuss it.
Or if I may, Javier, there's also metals that look like wood today.
Yeah, that's
Project like
actually
that.
frowned upon by the board.
It is.
The board does not appreciate looking like something. The board is.
I didn't know
Can we add the word
Materials to be true to their
insect-resistant
nature.
wood?
What's that?
Can we use the word
That's pressure treated, you
insect-resistant?
can.
No, cedar is insect-resistant.
You could use cedar.
There's sections in the code that allow wood.
Cedar,
Yeah,
yes.
the zoning code, right?
Like trellises in commercial, you're allowed to do in a trellis out of cedar.
We've done it.
We done
Yeah,
it.
and I don't have a problem with it.
On the roof
My problem
terraces,
is that
the
they start
pool, the
using,
pool areas.
southern yellow pine, and we got a problem, and it's allowed here. That's it. It's a technical issue.
It's not allowed,
I have
at
more.
pool levels,
Let me
common
finish.
areas.
Let me finish. I think
Yeah.
that's something that I would insert the term insect-resistant ahead of wood.
The type of wood species that's in the code right now, address that issue.
You're right, it does.
I know, I
Okay, well, that's why I just
It's-
wanted
it's
to bring it
already
up.
there. It's already
Perfect,
there.
it's in there. Forget
It's
what I
already
said.
there.
Next. 11, page 11, section 11. Right above where it says streetscape and public realm, buildings and open space design shall be coordinated with existing and proposed public realm enhancements for adjacent rights of ways to ensure unified and pedestrian-friendly public spaces.
So you want to add the words existing and proposed?
Yep. It forces them to coordinate in with Public Works and make sure that we're not doing something cross purposes between what has been designed by Public Works and approved by you guys and what is being proposed in a
That's fine.
project.
Yeah, I
And
don't think it hurts.
hopefully they work together.
Okay.
I've seen where it doesn't many times, as have you, I'm sure. 12.
Page, so.
Where we're talking about section 13, windows and doors shall be vertically proportioned or subdivided to appear vertical. Horizontal windows, and I would add the word "and" doors, are prohibited.
I had a question about that also. Is that horizontal format or horizontal rolling windows?
Rolling.
Rolling, right? Okay.
So
So
how's
it's the
that
type of
read?
window, it's not the layout of the
Not
window,
the proportion of it, yeah.
which I think we
think
don't
that's
want
what I'm-
horizontal windows on a med building
And,
because that's.
and we don't want sliding doors, which is
that's
a
style.
rolling door.
What's that?
And a sliding door is a rolling door.
A slider, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so windows or doors.
So replace and with or? Is that what I'm gathering?
I said windows and or doors.
Well,
Horizontal acting windows.
and/or is sort of,
How about
frowned
windows
upon.
and doors?
can they do either?
I would say they could do
Windows
neither.
or doors, or both windows and doors, if you want to be very specific, or
That's why we have you here.
right.
All right, and I'll
I think
take it.
windows or doors covers
you.
it,
Or.
which would allow.
I'm not
you-
as much of a legal wordsmith as you are.
Well,
Just looking
that's,
at it from English.
that's why I'm sitting here with you.
Perfect, and I appreciate it. Thank you. The rest of the items, the 11. We talked about examples given in the code. I like the samples you came in with the graphics of allowed height increases.
The
and-
architectural features?
Yeah. I think if we had that in plan elevation and perhaps a three-dimensional, it would probably be much more illustrative and might benefit all of us going forward. And that would be my suggestion.
Javier, can I just go back to one of your points here?
Yeah.
On 14, regarding the horizontal sliding windows and doors,
Right.
prohibited on the exterior building facade. What about, so that's the face, that's the
Yeah.
front, right?
Right.
Well, the paseo is sticking out like a sore thumb, and you see three sides of that building from US 1.
So,
Do we want to see sliders on the sides of the buildings that is visible from the street?
That would still be the exterior of the facade.
Pardon me?
It's still the exterior of the
Still the
facade, whether it's
exterior
the
of the
front or the
facade.
side or the
Okay,
rear.
not just the front, right?
no.
No, it doesn't say
Okay,
front.
it's the entire wrap around the building.
Right.
The
Okay.
whole envelope.
But if you set your balcony terrace in, they don't really mind if it's a roller at that point, because
Right,
you don't really see
that's a
it.
discussion we've had. If the balcony has a deep recess,
Right.
they can do something different there because it's
Okay.
not visible from the plane of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to that one, I would limit it to those that are doors and windows that are within 5 or 6 feet of the face of the building. When they're set back, then they're not necessarily visually impacted. But I didn't want to go there and create that condition, but that's something to
We
consider.
don't have a measurement, no.
No.
I think, again, it's up to the board. They look at that and they've openly,
As I recall at our last meeting, from what I saw, you said that there's a movement afoot for these folding
animals,
doors, right?
that animals, yeah. A lot of people are looking at that now.
And as long as they're vertically divided and
Well, they look,
and
as long as they
operate
look
that
like a French door, I don't think we have an issue with it. What we don't want is the little thin,
They're on the same plane.
yeah, they're on the same plane and they
When
don't have the
clothes are in
little
the
thin
same
frame
plane.
that the sliding doors have.
And
so
ideally, they are set back from the facade quite a bit.
Typically, again, that's
something-
our,
that's something
that's
to be
our
thought
request, but we have to, again, negotiate with people sometimes. It's not always black and white.
Problem is getting the pressure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Felix covered this one. By the way, I want to say thank you to our fellow board member Felix for having done such a wonderful review of this med bonus criteria.
Thank you for
I
not
saw
using
it.
the word excruciating.
No, it wasn't excruciating, but it was very informative, very on point, and very helpful. As I went through it again in preparation for tonight. So page 14, section 1, arcades and logias, about the middle of that section. When using columns from a classical order, e.g. Tuscan, Doric, Ionic, Corinthian, or composite, the correct elements and proportions of that order shall be used. I would add the term generally accepted after the word the. Generally accepted correct elements and proportions that are the order shall be used.
Okay.
And those would be then Vitruvius, Vignola, Lutyens, there's lots of it, but they're all generally accepted. So they don't come in with something crazy.
We have several classically trained architects on the board that look at that,
Yes,
so, you know.
I know them. I'm one of them, believe it or not. I actually went to the Beaux-Arts and studied there.
There you go.
How about that? Page 16, Felix got that one as well. Okay, I had an issue here on page 16, section 7, and Felix partially addressed it, but I just want to go over it again so we can clarify it. Each multifamily zone property shall provide at least 20% of the required ground level landscape open area, percentage based on the total area as publicly accessible. My problem with it is English, because you've got as publicly accessible. I assume your intent is that that 20% is accessible to the public from a public right-of-way. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Is that your
They
intent?
can't fence it, they can't enclose it, yeah.
Can we
That's-
say
That's
that?
the intent.
That's the intent, but that's not what it says.
That's my understanding when you say that, but.
I would add some sort of term that says it's readily accessible, publicly accessible. So that the
I
term.
do have a question on that.
Yeah.
Do we use publicly accessible in other places in the code?
We have. Remember, this is optional. This is one of the options they can pick and choose.
Because if we start changing to readily accessible, which is perfectly okay, then we're going to have to do it throughout, because somebody say, well, you expressed it here, but you didn't express it there.
Then perhaps
So
what we can do it
the
is
addiction.
in the definitions of publicly accessible and say that areas that are readily accessible from the public right-of-way.
You reminded me of
Yeah.
something, that there's still references in the other sections of the Mediterranean Code that still call, the 3 levels. Instead of now it's called prerequisite and level 1, level 2. You may want to go back and take a look.
Oh, you found some?
Oh, found 3.
Okay.
I just forgot to mention.
Next section, and again, Felix addressed this last time we met, but I wanted to just underline it because there was something I wanted to clarify. And it's the next section having to do with the developer shall contribute 0.25%, 0.25% of the aggregate project value to an established fund for landscape acquisition and the creation of parks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where it says project value, is that defined somewhere?
I believe it's defined in our definitions, but I can double check.
Can we check that? Because
Yeah.
right now, project value can mean anything.
I think that was Robert who made that point.
Okay. Thank you, Robert. Okay.
You're very welcome.
Here's another one Felix brought up. Let me see here. Okay.
Thank you.
So we're going to leave that in. That was clarified. Did we decide or not to leave public art, since public art is on page 17, section 9, pedestrian amenities, including public art? Are we leaving public art in the list? Because there was some discussion last time with regards to its inclusion, because there's art in public places that may or may not be in conflict with us.
Well, the article place has to go through a whole process. This would just be public art. They'll go through the
So, but
DOA process, I guess.
Again, when you say public art, it could be a mural, it could be lots of different things, and there's no necessarily, if it's the owner provided, the developer provided,
Then it doesn't count for art in public place.
yeah, it doesn't count as art in public place.
Right.
It has to be approved.
It has to be approved.
Right. If it's approved by the commission, it can count against it.
Yeah, but it has to go through the process of approval.
But that's required on all projects, right?
If they're
Public
going
art?
to, yeah, so you're required at a certain threshold, I think it's 20,000 square feet, to be part of the ARPA places provided, either on site or a waiver by paying into the fund. Or I think it's vice versa. I think the waiver is to provide it, and then otherwise you pay into the fund.
Yeah, but my only concern is that it says pedestrian amenities on both private property and/or public open spaces, including a minimum of 4 of the following. And one of those is public art. But if I do 4 others, then I don't have to do public art?
You
Public
would
arts-
in another process, right? Our public places process, you'd have to do that, yes. This is not trumping that.
Is it your-
Arts in public places is mandatory based on the construction cost, and then you have options on how you execute the public
So I don't
art.
have public art in this section?
But you can still have public art that's not
Right.
part of
In
the
addition
ARPA
to-
places.
Oh, in
Art-
addition
art-
to.
There's art in public places, that's a whole. different-
Mandatory, you have to.
Correct, that's a
Yes.
whole
This
different
does
setup.
not in any way conflict the monies, okay, got it.
Right.
Thank you. That's what I meant. Okay,
Continue, please.
that was okay. Okay, page 18, top of the page, we're talking about pedestrian pass-throughs, paseos on properties contiguous to alleys and/or streets. Include pedestrian amenities as defined herein. I didn't see it, and I may have missed it, but these paseos usually go along between one public right-of-way and another public right, either between the buildings or through the buildings.
Yes.
Right.
And we've gone before and created the widths that we want, et cetera, in
Again,
previous
that's a
sections.
discussion that occurs at the board level, if we feel it's too
Right.
narrow, if it's too wide.
That's fine, and that's
It's
fine.
not directional.
My issue is one that I would just add, that they align with existing paseos on adjacent properties or
That's
or
the
alleyways.
big picture. The intent is to have circulation through the blocks, but that may or may not happen depending on the development.
It might or it might not, but if you have the opportunity, you
Yeah.
have a property that's
That
going to be
would be the
developed,
ideal
that you would
scenario.
want to make sure that they're aligned.
That's the intent.
That's the intent.
I
Or
don't know
that
how
there's
you
some,
put that into words.
or that there's
Like,
some
but
sort
then-
of continuity connection to them.
Yeah,
Like when they
that's
did the
what we want.
parking garage in front of the palace, they have a walkway through it and they jiggered it to get through there so that it aligned.
Yeah.
And it's not the world's greatest jiggering, but at least it does provide covered access to, and you're only crossing in the rain through the alley. And so that is actually helpful.
But yeah, we can put subsection D in there and say align or be consistent with the existing or proposed paseo network or something
And
like
that's what
that.
I'm looking for. Felix covered the next one as well. Felix, you're all over my notes. Okay, I think I was good for the rest of it.
Thank you.
I reserve my time for another comment. Let's finish. Go ahead.
Julio?
I don't have anything.
Thank you, Julio. Robert?
Mine was very quick. Last time, we talked about, and I think Felix and I were part of that conversation regarding the depth of the habitable liner. That I saw something now that is 20
20
feet.
feet for the front street. We talked about kind of defining that.
I
only for the
thought
front
we
street.
also mentioned something to include where feasible.
Where feasible, without a doubt, that's what.
And I didn't see it there.
But then we talked about if it's optional, if it's feasible, do they get credit if they select that as one of their
And I remember
12?
the conversation, I don't remember.
Without a doubt. It's in the
Agreed.
transcript.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Please go back to the transcript. It's in the transcript.
So if we put if feasible, they can propose to the Board of Architects
Where
and say
feasible.
that they are complying with that.
Well, the reason is that the discussion had to do with a previous project that came before the board, which was a triangular parcel on Alhambra Circle, which was a 12-story, which came down to 8-story, and they complied with the code. And then the problem was that because they had 1, 2, 3 sides,
triangular parcel, then they had difficulty. So Robert said, well, feasible.
Is your point, may I interject, is your point that this is one of the optional elements?
Correct, yes.
And if it's not feasible, should you get credit for it as an optional element?
If it's not feasible,
Maybe
then you
if
just
it's
would
not feasible,
And that was
then
discussed.
why should
Was
you
brought
get
up.
credit
That you don't
under
use
that
that one
option?
as a credit.
So if that's the concern, you could say if determined not to be feasible, therefore.
But that project
it should not get credit for that.
But that project that we use as example, they could only do it on one street.
on the front street. That's why I was understood.
But
the
that had
discussion
three
was the one
fronts,
street.
three streets.
Yeah, but it's really fronting.
So that I think that's where feasible is applicable, because they had three frontage. I thought it was triangular site and it had three frontages. They could only do it in one because it was only feasible in one. Then you're gonna penalize them and not get the bonus for that?
Right.
You know, to me, that project was a great example to use in this. Were feasible because they could only do it on one and could not do it on all three of them.
They could not do it on all of them, but they could do it on most of them.
On the front street. Yeah.
And I guess her point is that there's only one front street. There's only one front of the building. You don't have three fronts to the building. You have a front, you have frontages. No, there's a difference between a front of a building, a main entrance, a lobby, elevator.
The
This
address.
is where I want my people to come in. And then there is, by nature of the site that I bought, I have three frontages. But again, I don't think you can hold somebody to that level where we say, hey, all three of your. Right. I think that's unfair.
So you have front
But
streets
it's
and
to
you
the
have side
point that-
That's what you're
streets.
saying.
Yeah, it's to the point that, you know, it's not clear, and then are you gonna hold them? That's the only, and then the other one is the depth of the liner. You know?
Yeah.
So we took that out, I think, in July, and then we talked about it again in, I don't know, August or something, or last meeting. Then we put it back in because there was concerns that there wasn't an actual number. And we talked about what
But
City of
the
Miami
liner,
does for
okay, the
Miami
liner
21.
includes, to be clear, the liner includes the hallway, the corridor to get to it?
Sure,
Or is
yeah.
that, or it's just the actual liner unit? Because if it includes the corridor, then you're gonna have like a 15-foot, 16, you know,
We discussed was 16 plus 4.
right, you know, 20, but because you don't want to do is something, you may not be able to do 20 plus then the corridor. So just to be, that's my only
Right, but if
comment
you're
that I
counting that corridor
remember.
as habitable space that you're counted against FAR, I don't see why it would not be part of that 20 feet. I think it would be included in that 20 feet.
So the corridor is part of the
20
habitable
feet.
space. Okay,
Minimum.
that's it.
I mean, they can always provide more.
Okay,
But again, this is for the front street.
okay. Mr. Chair, that's my only.
Thank you. We've had a lot of discussion about the process and what should go first and what should go second. An example that we recently had was Ponce Park Residences, the Alan Morris project. And that was a project that went through the process as the city has it today. It came to us, and the project was obviously just way too big, too massive, and it got sent back to them 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. It went back to the point where they actually had to redesign the project, which we spoke about the cost involved of having to redo the project. And then,
They actually went to commission, it was denied at commission.
correct. It went through us 3 times and then went to
they-
commission.
Then they appealed it to the commission, and it failed on appeal.
Correct.
If I remember correctly.
And then it went back to the Board of Architects
Brand new building.
as a brand-new building through the process,
architect.
through architect.
Brand new
Attorney.
Brand new lawyer.
Right, but
brand new-
it was a whole new project when it came to us.
Everything.
And at that point, that project was approved because it was done right.
That's.
And the example that I want to bring is, I'm not so sure the entire process is broken. I'm just looking at that project as an example. I'm not saying that the process shouldn't be tweaked, or there's always something we can all do better, whether it's a city, whether it's a board, whether it's an individual. But I think the main step is recognizing it. As long as we all recognize that there's a flaw in a process, it's our responsibility to improve on that process. And that's what I'm hearing from my fellow board members. It's not so much to chastise somebody and to me, it's not who did this and why and what. It's there were mistakes made, there were issues made. We need to find out what they are to improve it, to improve the quality of life for all of us, not just one section of town or another section of town. The other point that I want to make is the last project, one of the last projects also that came before us, which is the MARC. In that project, also, we all looked at it and we said, this thing is huge. There's just no way. It went through a process. I don't think the process was as long, but it went through a process. But that developer, according to my understanding, decided to take a different route to look at its approvals. And the different route that it decided to take were beyond our control of what we can approve or not approve. And it may end up being actually a bigger building, and I could be wrong, but it may end up being a bigger building than what they were coming before us.
That's the danger in the box that we're opening up.
Correct. And that's what I want to point out.
That developers have the ability to max a site, and when they come to the BOA, they address the comments and the massing discussions that we have, and they work on it, and they provide responses to what we tell them, but that's the negative about this discussion is that you might get developers to say, you know what, but again, that's going to go nowhere. So they're going to spend more money, more time, but that's a definite possibility. We have that discussion internally all the time that, we're chastising these people. We're telling them to reduce it, to drop it, to lower it, cut it up. And it happens to us a lot on residential work on large lots where, we get these.
It's the one I'm discussing is on US 1.
US 1, across from UM.
Bagel Emporium
The
is.
bridge. There's a danger there, and we deal with that weekly on our side.
My point is we have to be careful
We do.
of those
We have to be
issues.
careful 'cause-
And we have to be to familiarize ourselves as much as possible so we know what to give and what
It's-
not to give
At the
to
end of the
reach
day, it's a
to reach a
negotiation.
medium.
It really is. We have.
I think the discussions, like I said at the very beginning, this is our 6th meeting that was posted, 5 which we actually have spoken about because we deferred one. And there's been a lot of healthy discussion among everybody. And I think it's good. I really do. Everybody on the board does not always agree with each other, but in the end, I think we always come to a good decision as to what has to be done.
Sue agree with me 3 times tonight.
That's a bonus. That's all.
Memorable day, we're going to write it down.
And one last final point which I want to make is the city attorney's office. There's been a lot of discussion about the city attorney's office. The city attorney's office is city staff and a department within the city of Coral Gables. If there are discrepancies which the board feels that we have with an interpretation, then what I would ask is that possibly we should ask for an interpretation itself of that individual, the way they're interpreting the code. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know what the venue is or what the process is. But to me, I think the right thing would be for us as a board to ask if an individual within the city attorney's office feels strong about something. For me, I'd like to know why, and I'd like to know an interpretation in the legal sense. I understand, Felix, and you make a very good point. I'm not disagreeing with your point that it's clearly written a certain way. But to me, I would like to ask an interpretation to know from other legal individuals to give that, for me or for the board to really understand what's going on, because I think that's going to be an issue going forward with the Board of Architects. And I think that has to be clarified, because
We would love that.
that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the correct answer is, but there's got to be some way to get a correct interpretation, whether it's from outside counsel, whether it's maybe looking.
The board is a board. You can't go to outside counsel. But if you want to get, if you want to get a further explanation from the city attorney
That would
on
be
this issue, I believe that Gus was here at the last meeting, but it seems like there's still a feeling of not really sure you understand the scope of the
That is correct,
of the
but
Board of
also-
Architects versus the scope of the Planning and Zoning Board, and the issue of compatibility and how that's considered. I thought there was a discussion. I'll certainly report back to the city attorney. There still is uncertainty over that.
There was a discussion, but I feel it's unfair for Gus not to be here to defend himself when he feels strong about something, and that's what I meant by an interpretation. Sometimes if one side feels one way so strongly, the other side feels a certain way, there's got to be something that clarifies it. That's all I'm saying. I feel that he should be allotted to defend himself.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I would like to correct Mr. Collins that this is not a compatibility issue. It is a process issue where Mr. Samayo was here, and the verbatim minutes speak for themselves, because from the previous meeting, if you recall, again, I was told through you, the city attorney, that I had made a mistake in saying that the city attorney's office was influencing by restricting the Board of Architects. And Judy Carty, the chair of the Board of Architects, came up and reinforced exactly what I had said. Then, when you were out and the city attorney was here, Christina was here, and Mr. Sabayo was here also, that's when he explained what he explained, which sounded very good and well, except when I saw the transcripts, it's exactly the way I saw it. He defended himself from the previous meeting, but I think this is not about defending or accusing. This is not a personal thing. This is more a directive thing from the city attorney's office, not the assistant city attorney.
Well, I believe that I've texted the city attorney on this issue. And what she said to me was, the Board of Architects should not consider zoning requests. So yes, appropriate to assume they have zoning approval for purposes of focusing on just the design, which is somewhat aligned with what was said before. But if the board doesn't like that, this is your opportunity to make a change. If you had talked about, well, maybe we need to have a theoretical project that comes before the board, and then it goes back to the Board of Architects. I'm not supporting it or not supporting it. I'm telling you, I'm giving the board the option, if you wish, to address this as part of this process.
But this had nothing to do with the Board of Architects obstructing upzoning. It was simply an exercise of saying, well, this is the existing massing that you get off the existing zoning, and then you show the massing of the proposed zoning. You can't award those bonuses subjective to, well, you have to assume that it's going to get approved. That is where I think
Well, I
the city
think-
attorney's office stepped way out of line.
Well, I think the way they're posturing it, and I wasn't there, but I think they're trying to separate, which is very difficult to separate, the zoning piece from the design piece. It's a very difficult, but that's what the code is really instructing. The Board of Architects is not supposed to be the board that grants zoning. So it's a difficult challenge. I'm suggesting to the board, if you want,
Said something now that is not right.
which is,
The Board of Architects has never said, we're the ones that are going to approve the zoning. But the massing is a direct cause when you're looking at upzoning. The massing gets changed from this size to maybe shown on the model, 3 or 4 or 5 times. Look at that.
which this board, when you look at that, you find it to be incompatible. The massing that, as I read the transcript, the massing that they're talking about, as I understand it, is the massing, if you got the Mediterranean bonus, what is the impact of that massing?
2 or 3 floors. What they're talking about is the massing of the change of zoning.
Right, and
That's a completely different animal.
and apparently, from what I'm reading, they want to tease out the zoning from the design. They want the board to focus on the design. And if the design has a problem, which I believe was from the transcript, if the design has a problem that makes it incompatible,
Felix,
then you make an adjustment.
Again, you're repeating this, but what I'm trying to tell you is, in the things that the Board of Architects does, it's not just, oh, how pretty the color is, it's all about massing, scale, and how it relates to existing neighborhoods. It's black and white.
Okay.
So the problem that we're having, I think, is not a question of that the Board of Architects is blocking an upzone. The Board of Architects has to be looking at the massing first, before they look at the details, before they look at the laundry list of things for the bonuses that only give you 2 floors. We're talking about projects that are coming in for an upzoning. For example, the Alan Morris building, which the chairman brought up. They did a great job. They came in with a building that was too big. But because they're being told no, 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 that was something. But they already had gone through bonuses. Again, based on the aesthetics, because they were told that by the city attorney's office. That is wrong. It was wrong then for that project, and it's wrong for every single project. And then on top of that, the city architect said, for 10 years they've been doing like that. Well, that's the reason we got the buildings that we have in this city.
Well,
That's the problem.
then you can make a legislative change.
Is there-
And that's what we're discussing today, a legislative
Right,
change.
that's what
And that part of the code is part of the Mediterranean bonus code, not just the boxes, not just the list.
And that's-
And for me, I think it's important to understand that if you're in the CBD, that building should be treated differently than if you're across the street from single-family residential.
Felix, would you like, in order to move this forward, would you like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, you're going to lose me very soon.
I know, that's-
Unfortunately, I had
He's got a personal issue.
You make the motion.
And, well, no, what I'd like to do is keep the board as whole as possible on the board.
I'll make a
And-
motion to approve,
I kind of like these special meetings, though, you know?
okay? I'll make a motion to approve, and I welcome whatever, limited input, so we could get this.
To approve what?
The way that if the modification has been presented to us.
I'm sorry, I can't support that. I would make a motion to defer this.
Well, we have a motion. Let's see what happens. We have a motion, as Robert has stated. Is there, with limited modifications, if somebody would like to do that, is there a second?
Point of clarification, what's a limited, what do you talk about limited? Because if we're talking about a legislative item here, that's not limited. That's not an add-on. That is a major component.
Not
right?
necessarily,
No?
right? I mean, I don't see that as a major, because that would be a process,
Okay.
not redo the whole. I think that what Jennifer has presented to us, I feel like, for the most part, I think we are in agreement that it's,
It could be, for example, the process to go through a
that you go a conceptual and then you
conceptual,
go back.
come back here.
Would that be considered legislative?
Yes, I think
Right?
so. Would that be
Right?
legislative?
And that's what I'm saying. So
It's
it's not incidental. I mean, to me, that's major, changing a process.
Well, if that's something that you'd like to ask, be
But
put
Sue,
in there.
it's yes, it is. But
Yeah,
what I'm saying is
but
not.
I do have one concern about addressing it in this title, because I don't know if this title would cover that.
Yeah, I would suggest probably two separate motions, one with the proposed changes
Yeah,
and
the-
one with the proposed change in the process.
Okay, so this would be approving the checklist, basically.
Yes, yes.
Would you add, based on the technical changes that we have put forth at this board in the previous meetings
All throughout, yeah.
throughout,
Throughout.
including
Yeah, the ones I
today?
wrote down from today.
Including today,
Including
yes.
today, yeah.
Including today.
Okay, then
It's
I
on
will
the
second it.
record. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, one thing,
Yes, sir.
just so you know, and for the record, the great majority of these changes were in the work that
Of the,
Blue Ribbon Committee did 3 years ago, because I checked them almost verbatim with the final draft.
You did a great
And
job.
I just want that to be in the record.
We, everybody in the Blue Ribbon Committee did a great job, and I commend that.
I want to take credit for that too.
Were you there?
Yeah.
You're on bid nice.
So how
Yes, sir. Wait,
how do we
Chip?
move the needle on the legislative side?
That's the
I have a
second.
thought, if I might suggest to the board. Because this is really probably beyond the scope of this title, because you're talking
Right.
about coming up with a conceptual plan coming forward.
Right.
I would suggest that you make a motion, direct the city commission to consider a change in the process to allow for conceptual projects to come first to the planning and zoning board.
Well,
I don't know if I,
not first to us. I think the Board of Architects.
Well, first to the board.
As a
then-
conceptual.
As conceptual, then the planning and zoning board gets the zoning, then it goes back, as I understand it, to the Board of Architects
And then it
for
comes
them
back?
to decide whether or not they're going to give them the,
and then it comes back to the Board of Art,
Yeah.
to Planning and Zoning?
yeah, when it gets finally, when it gets
Because
awarded.
it has to.
Yes. Yeah, so basically, I think you're separating the site plan approval from the land use and zoning changes.
But
So it would
we've
be land
always
zoning.
asked for site plans. I know
Yes,
we've
you
been
have.
that directive has always been, at least with my tenure, Robert's
But-
tenure.
yeah, but if-
We've always wanted a site plan.
But if it comes here first and the board has not seen it, I mean, we're not Board of Architects.
So I didn't mean to get off the discussion of the main motion, but I'll support the motion if we can have some discussion about how we kind of come up with a plan on that.
That's what we're at.
Okay.
Might I suggest we just move or vote on the first motion that we have, and then we can ask for another motion with regards to the process?
Yeah.
That way, we just go ahead and cleave it,
Simplify.
and it's simplified in our mind.
Okay, Mr.
yes,
Attorney?
thank you, yes.
Okay,
But is there some way to put in there that, yeah, we're approving the checklist, provided that there's a fix on the process? I
Or
mean, is
we're
there
going to make a
some-
motion now after we vote on
After we
this.
voted the-
You're going to make
after
a
we vote the
motion.
text.
you're going to make a
After we vote on,
motion.
you're gonna make a
We're
motion.
doing that tonight,
Kind of
Sue.
like us in med bonus and design. That's what you're doing. You're doing a two-step
All right,
process.
we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion?
No.
No. Jill, call the roll, please.
Felix Pardo? No. Javier Salman?
Yes.
Chip Withers?
Yes.
Robert Behar.
Yes.
Julio Gabriel.
Yes.
Zuko Walensky.
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. Now
Sue,
the
make a
second
motion.
part.
So here's a crazy idea. I don't know if it makes
I
sense.
see the mouth is better.
It would benefit me, 'cause you have no idea how much respect I have for architects over the last 5 months. And what Mr. Pardo said really has resonated with me, is that they really could be the gatekeepers in development in the city, if empowered to do so, I'm assuming. Would it benefit any of us, probably not the architects on the board, but to have any kind of joint session with the architectural board?
I like that.
No? I mean, I'd just like to ask them questions and stuff myself.
I personally would like to see the city architect and the chair and the
Okay.
assistant chair of the
Perfect.
Board of Architects, as they were here at the previous
And
meeting.
let's just discuss it.
And to discuss it. They know what's wrong.
Right.
And they know what has to be fixed. And the other thing is, I would like to have the city attorney's office here also.
Yeah.
Because it's not written anywhere of the direction that they're giving. And it tends to be, we don't want to get sued, we don't want to this, we don't want to do that. But there has to be something very clear to the Board of Architects so they know what everybody that sits on the board that makes a decision can and cannot do.
So we're not gonna be making a motion and take a vote on that tonight?
No,
Well,
You know
that
what? I
was-
think it needs a lot more discussion.
Okay. Because if that's the case, I have to leave. I had, unfortunately, a death in the family, so. But this was important enough to be here.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, he was not going to come. And for the record, Robert was not going to come tonight, and he felt it important to come. Robert, thank you. Let the record show that Robert has left the meeting, please.
I mean, what I said earlier, and I really, the city has to be as objective as possible in their policies. But we're really creating a great deal of subjectivity in the process we have now, because they're making assumptions and plans on something that is not solid, it's not out there. You know,
I believe, Chip, that we need to get the city attorney on board with what has to be done for the Board of Architects to do what they do, and to do it right. And it goes from buildings that already have a matter of right and protected by Bert Harris, and also people that are applying to upzone, because nobody applies to downzone. And the other thing is that it has, in my opinion, it has to be a public meeting, because the people that are sitting in this audience are the people that are ultimately affected by this. And this has just gone on way too long, and there's been already too much damage to the city.
well, it's already upzoned. By the time it hits us, it's already been upzoned, if you think about it, because they've met the criteria, the 6 or 7, 8 criteria. It's already upzoned from that envelope.
Right, and I really believe that by doing it the way that it's been done, the Board of Architects is used basically as a tool when it comes to this board.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to advise the board that any change in the comp plan or any change in zoning has to go to this board.
Correct.
It does not come to, nothing comes to this board already upzoned unless the city commission already upzoned it. And it would have had to come before this board first.
No doubt about
But
it.
there's a presumption,
But the project we look at already has been.
right?
It's a perception.
And
Yeah,
to be,
It's an incorrect perception.
You're
Exactly,
absolutely
as Maria just said, when she was up here, she said it's already kind of like baked in. You know, there's a psychological shadow saying, well, if they approved it, it must be okay. We should do it too, and that's not
I don't
correct.
agree. I don't agree with that, because I don't look at. I can speak for myself. I don't look at a project and say this happened and I should do it again. To me, and we should all look at each project individually for its own merits and for what it stands for. So
We call it case by case.
Well, yeah,
Correct.
and that's the
That's how we look
idea.
at it.
That's the ideal. But you know, I would question
But we
whether that
shouldn't
has been
feel-
practiced.
I disagree. In other words, I disagree that a board member comes and says, well, it's already been done, or they give the bonuses already with the Board of Architects. Let me just rubber stamp it. I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen.
I have heard it here on this, I mean, you know, well, I've heard it more than once where it said it was approved for bonus already by the Board of Architects. So whatever you think or say, you still have to approve it, but still, that carries weight, and it's the wrong weight to carry. Right.
Again, that is, as my recollection of that particular statement, which I have heard countless times here, it comes out of the mouth of the attorney for the developer. And he's saying it on purpose to create a perception. Now, if we want to buy into that, that's up to us.
It's called projection.
It's all about projection. If we want to be the suckers and say, yeah, okay.
And again,
But we're not.
I think,
We are
I
not.
agree with the chair. If you look at permits, how they're reviewed, you know, there's multiple departments. Just like in here, there's multiple steps to an approval. And just because you get one department or one approval doesn't
Doesn't infer you're gonna
guarantee
get
that
another.
you're going to get. For example, this happens all the time with residential work and at our staff level. Oh, I got approval from building and structural, so I think I can get my permit. No, you got to get BOA approval. And BOA approval is probably more important than structural
but, you know,
or building.
but there's-
So it's
it's-
part of a process, and just because they have those approvals
You know, that's
doesn't sway us.
You know what? And that's the ideal. But we're human beings. We get persuaded, and we say, "Well, we did it for them last month. What's wrong with it? We're wrong with doing it this time for this project too." We're human beings.
No,
You
more
know,
importantly, you got staff approval. Staff has said they met all the qualifications, they're deserving of this.
yeah.
But we're also supposed to listen to all the testimony that's presented
that. I
before
know
us,
that, but when you-
before we make our
There is what's
determination.
presented.
And there's been so many times that I've sat on this board where the staff has recommended approval, where I've seen this board and the individuals and the members on this board say, I disagree.
Absolutely.
You know what? Can I
But it should be.
can I recommend because we can talk all night that we have a special meeting with you, Juan, and Judy Cardy, and
And Peter. Yes.
and Peter and the city attorney. And I don't think it should be at a regular P&Z meeting because I think we probably have a big agenda from what was canceled last time. We have a big upcoming agenda. And I don't think we want to be here till midnight. Can we have a special meeting? I think this worked terrifically. And I think this is important enough where a special meeting with all those parties concerned is going to be very important.
I think we're putting the cart before the horse because we're not in the position where we can make that recommendation. But I would make the recommendation and get the commission to approve us to look at that issue with regards to the process.
You know,
Correct
I
legislative
disagree.
way of
You know,
doing something.
I disagree because it's a vague notion that we're presenting them.
No, it's not a vague notion. We're looking at making specific modifications to the process for approval of buildings that will receive a Mediterranean bonus or are a PAD.
You know what, though? If I was a commissioner, I would say, well, show me the examples. Just like that model gave us a real clear vision. If I'm a commissioner, I want to know exactly what the heck you're talking about and what your suggestions are. Not a vague notion we're going to meet, and we might change the process. I'd rather have something solid in front of me.
The only reason that it is, I think that the only reason that it is in our wheelhouse.
That's so you can walk and sing at the same time.
Got it. So the only reason it's in our wheelhouse is because the first portion is part of the Mediterranean bonus component. We were charged to look at reviewing this entire section of the Mediterranean component, which is all of it, including that process. And I think that if we ignore what the Board of Architects is or is not doing, and they're the ones that ultimately get blamed. They get nothing but blame. They get very little credit.
Felix, all I'm suggesting is that we make a motion to further review the process that is used in the approval of the Mediterranean bonuses. And that's it. We just make that motion.
I think it delays the process.
To make I'm sorry, to make a motion, so I understand.
Make a motion for us to, initially I had said to seek approval from the commission to continue to make the changes to the process. But what you're saying is that we're already charged that.
Right.
We already have it.
Okay.
Because it's part of.
Then the motion would be for us to then continue until such, for another special meeting for the review of the process and have that discussion at that time. Is that what you're saying?
Do we need a motion for that?
Yeah, do we need a motion for that?
Yes, because we just approved this.
Because you just approved part of it.
Part of it.
In other words.
You approved the technical.
Mr. Collar would
I think the commission, it would be helpful, since you're passing this, that the commission should be aware that you want to look at this.
Agreed.
So, so I mean.
That's what Javier was
I
saying.
was saying initially, but Felix has a point. It's sort of included in here.
Oh, no, it is included in there.
It's not sort of, it is included in there.
Right, so the commission, when they get this recommendation of the changes to the train design, they'll have the minutes, and we'll summarize this meeting, and we'll summarize the discussion that had this board had.
But when is the commission meeting next?
November 12th, I think.
So,
Well, then we should make a motion to say that we further recommend, besides this approval, that the process for awarding those bonuses between the Board of Architects and this board be explored for further modification of this criteria
you mean come back to us?
and come back to us for that purpose.
Is that what you're saying, Felix?
Well,
I mean, any legislative change in the code will come back here.
Correct.
Understood. But I'm saying we're approving the technical issues that we discussed today, which we just voted upon. And then add in the recommendation that we continue to review the process by which those bonuses are approved. These are the technical criteria for the approval. We're looking at the process approval. The procedural approval. We make that further
Right.
recommendation with the approval of the technical.
The larger concern is the change of zoning and how it's being assumed at the Board of Architects level before it comes here, I think is the bigger concern, right?
Yeah, it's about working it out between the Board of Architects. We can't charge them without getting them
Right.
involved.
what I want to make sure is that we stop the city attorney's office from saying, Board of Architects, you must review this as if this zoning, which hasn't gone to the planning board, which hasn't gone to the commission for final approval. In other words, it comes to us for recommendations, and then it goes to the commission for final approval. That I think that we have to do it in such a way that the city attorney's office is not instructing the Board of Architects on something that they can or cannot do.
That's a legal determination, what you're saying.
No.
I thi-
Legal determination is different.
Well, I
This is a
think, as I understand it, there's a subset of applications that come before the Board of Architects. Those are applications that seek, in addition, comp plan changes and upzoning. Those are the applications you're concerned about, where the Board of Architects is looking at it as if those things would be granted, and then what does the design look like?
Collar,
So what you
You are correct.
so right.
And
So
there's
what you
actually
really
three
want,
items.
what you really want, is for those applications to actually come before this board for a preliminary determination as to whether or not you would in fact grant that comp plan and grant that zone change. So when it goes back to the Board of Architects, they know exactly whether or not this board, which is still a recommending board, it's still going to be made a decision of the city commission, but the Board of Architects will know exactly where the board stands on those issues.
Doesn't that
So-
resolve that?
And this would be
So what you're looking for is actually a procedural change into the zoning code. And what I thought you were going to do is advise the city commission that there's an issue that the board is concerned about with
we
regard to this
recommend-
procedure, and that this board would like to look at it and come up with recommendations to the city commission on how it should be handled.
I think, that's a healthy discussion with the commission, but since what came before us is part of this section, what is missing is the identification of those type of applications in the two-part BOA review
Right.
approvals.
But the problem is the title, I think the title is limiting. So what you're going to be given the opportunity, if the city commission wants you to look at it, is say, fine, let's have an item that addresses that, have a title that encompasses the potential change, and have this board weigh in on it. I think that's what you want.
Correct.
That's exactly what I want.
So I'm just trying to, there's a couple ways to do it. One is you could just say, let's have a special meeting. But then you're not letting yes, and the city commission will look at your minutes, which is one way to do it. Another way to do it is, since this board has made recommendations in the past in connection with other items, is to make a recommendation to the city commission that this issue needs to be looked at, and we would like to look at it.
Correct. I like that.
I'll make that into a motion.
So the way, we have a motion the way Mr. Collar described it. We have a second by Chip.
I have a question for,
Go ahead,
are
please.
we allowed to speak to our commission appointees on this issue?
I don't know.
Is it a quasi, what kind of issue is
It's
it?
a
Well, see, this is legislative, so I would say there's not an issue.
It's not quasi judicial.
It's not a quasi judicial item.
Mr. Collar, the only thing we can't do is talk among ourselves.
Yes, you
Oh, yeah,
cannot.
absolutely. I just want to know if I can.
Right.
Because
But
my commissioner calls me and says, what did you guys talk about at the meeting? I just want to know if I'm.
Right, but you can't go from commissioner to commissioner to commissioner.
understand.
But you can speak to your commissioner.
Okay.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion?
That's good.
Call the roll, please.
Javier Salmon,
Before I say yes, I want to thank the city attorney representative here to our board for having made concise a motion that I think we were all headed towards, and I appreciate that, and I would vote yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Sue Kowalinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes, before we adjourn, I just want to thank staff for all the hard work that they have really done in putting this together. I know that there's a lot of discussion to be had going forward, with even projects coming before us, but, we welcome that. Thank you.
And if I could add to that, and thank you, Felix Pardo, for really going through this with a fine-tooth comb so we didn't have to. Thank you.
I just handed you a gun.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
And, Mr. Chairman, can we have staff send us all the exhibits that were put up here during their presentation today?
The PowerPoint? Sure, we can try that.
The graphic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Again, is there a motion to adjourn? We have a motion by Felix, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. 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 Thank you, everybody.